Sometimes a man spends his whole life running from who he is, only to find the past was waiting all along. At 61, Tom Herrera thought he'd seen everything, but nothing prepared him for a house bought for $1. Deep in the Texas borderlands, a man with cartel ties offers Tom a crumbling estate for a single dollar. Tom takes it, desperate for a fresh start. Inside, he discovers a hidden room untouched for decades. Photos of his mother as a girl, letters in her handwriting, and a journal from the father. He never knew a cartel accountant who vanished in the 1,970 seconds. What truth was buried in those walls, and can one man's past save his future? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dust hung thick in the air like memories Tom Herrera couldn't shake. He stood in the center of what had once been a grand living room, his boots leaving, prints in decades of accumulated grime. Through the broken windows, the late afternoon sun cut diagonal lines across the floor, illuminating particles that danced and settled, as if the house itself was breathing after a long sleep. Tom was 61 years old, and he looked every day of it. His face was weathered leather, creased from years of squinting into desert horizons. His hair, more salt than pepper now, stuck out from beneath a sweat-stained Stetson that had seen better decades. He'd been a cowboy once, in the truest sense, working ranches from Montana to the Mexican border, never staying long enough to call anywhere home. That had been his life. Movement, distance, the comfortable anonymity of being just another hired hand passing through. But his knees ached now. His back protested every morning. The restlessness that had driven him for 4 decades had finally worn itself down to a dull throb, like an old wound on a cold day. He needed to stop. He needed land, a roof, something resembling permanence before his body gave out completely and left him dependent on the mercy of strangers. The house had appeared in his life 3 weeks ago, introduced by a man named Javier Soto in a dusty cantina just outside Del Rio. Tom had been nursing a beer, contemplating the $37 in his wallet and wondering where his next paycheck might come from, when Soto slid into the booth across from him. "You're Tomas Herrera," Soto had said. Not a question. Tom had stiffened. Nobody called him Tomas. He'd been Tom since he was 16, since he'd left his mother's house in El Paso and decided that half his heritage was enough. The Mexican half, the Herrera half, had always felt like a weight, a name that drew too many questions, too many assumptions, too many connections to places and people he'd rather forget. "Just Tom," he'd replied, keeping his voice neutral. Soto had smiled, a knowing thing that didn't reach his eyes. He was younger than Tom, maybe 45, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested money and connections. His shirt was pressed, his watch expensive, his hands soft. Not a working man, not someone Tom would normally trust. "I have a property," Soto had said, "about 40 miles from here. It needs someone to take care of it, someone with your background." "My background?" Tom had asked, because he'd had many backgrounds over the years, and none of them seemed particularly relevant to property management. "You're good with your hands. You know the land. You keep to yourself." Soto had paused, studying Tom's face. "And you're familiar. Distant, but familiar." That word familiar had sent a chill through Tom's chest. He'd spent his life avoiding familiar, avoiding the tangles of obligation and history that came with it. His mother, Rosa Herrera, had died when he was 15. She'd never spoken much about her own family, had seemed to carry the same restlessness Tom inherited, the same need to keep moving, keep distance between herself and whatever shadows chased her. "I don't know you," Tom had said flatly. "No, but I know you. I know your mother was Rosa Herrera, born in Piedras Negras. I know she left when she was 18 and never went back. I know she raised you alone in El Paso and that you lit out the day after her funeral." Soto had leaned forward. I know things about your family that you don't know yourself. Tom's jaw had tightened. The beer had gone warm in his hand. The property, Soto had continued, belonged to your grandfather. Technically, it's been empty for 40 years, maybe more. Abandoned, but it's still in the family name. Sort of. He'd pulled out a folded document, old and official-looking. I'm prepared to sell it to you for $1. Tom had laughed then, a dry bark of disbelief. $1. $1. Cash, right now. Why? Soto had shrugged, but his eyes had stayed sharp, calculating. Let's say I have interests in keeping certain properties occupied. Legitimate interests. A man living there, maintaining it, establishing residency that has value, more value than letting it rot. Your cartel, Tom had said, not bothering to make it a question. Soto's expression hadn't changed. I'm a businessman. Sometimes business involves complicated people, but this transaction is clean, legal. The deed is legitimate. You give me $1, I give you the house and 20 acres. You live there, fix what you can, and in return, you have a home, a place to finally stop running. Tom had wanted to walk away. Every instinct told him that nothing good came from deals with men like Soto. But $37 in his wallet, a body that hurt every morning, and the word home hanging in the air like a prayer he'd found himself asking where. Now he stood in that home, and home felt like a generous word. The Casa Herrera, as it was apparently known in county records, had once been a substantial hacienda-style estate. Adobe walls, thick and solid, formed the core structure. The roof, or what remained of it, showed exposed beams and patches of sky through missing tiles. Vines had claimed the exterior, threading through cracks, pulling at mortar, creating a living skin that both preserved and destroyed. Tom moved through the space slowly, taking inventory. The living room opened into a dining area, a long table still standing though coated in filth. Beyond that, a kitchen with ancient appliances and a floor that sagged ominously in one corner. A hallway led to what he assumed were bedrooms. Everything was frozen in time, as if the occupants had simply walked away one day and never returned. Which, Tom supposed, they probably had. He'd been here for 2 hours now, had cleared enough cobwebs to move freely, had tested floorboards and checked walls. The bones of the house were solid. Adobe didn't rot like wood. With work, months of work, he could make this livable. Maybe, even comfortable. His truck, a battered '89 Ford that had carried him across more states than he could count, was parked outside with everything he owned, a duffel bag of clothes, his grandfather's rifle, a toolbox, and a Coleman stove. Not much to show for 61 years, but it was enough to start. Tom pulled off his hat and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. The afternoon heat was building, even inside the thick walls. He'd need to get the windows open properly, let air move through. He'd need water, power, a plan. But first, he needed to understand what he'd bought. He made his way down the hallway, testing each door. The first bedroom was empty, except for a metal bed frame, rusted and listing to one side. The second held a dresser with drawers that had swollen shut from moisture. The third door, at the end of the hall, was locked. Tom stood there for a moment, studying the door. It was solid wood, older than the others, with a heavy iron lock that looked original to a house. Someone had wanted whatever was inside to stay inside. He went back to his truck, retrieved his toolbox, and returned with a pry bar. The lock was old, the wood around it softened by time. It took 3 solid strikes before the mechanism gave way with a crack that echoed through the empty house. The door swung inward on protesting hinges. The room beyond was smaller than the others, windowless, lit only by the faint light spilling in from the hallway. Tom pulled a flashlight from his belt and clicked it on. The beams swept across walls lined with shelves. The shelves held boxes, stacks of papers, books and objects wrapped in cloth. Everything was covered in dust, But unlike the rest of the house, this room had been sealed, protected from the elements. Whatever was here had been deliberately preserved. Tom stepped inside, his heart beating harder than it should. The air smelled different here, dry, stale, but not rotten. The smell of things kept but not forgotten. He approached the nearest shelf and picked up a framed photograph. The glass was clouded with dust, but when he wiped it clean with his thumb, a young woman looked back at him. She was maybe 17 or 18, wearing a simple dress, her dark hair pulled back. Her face was serious, unsmiling, but her eyes held something, a determination maybe, or a quiet strength. Tom's hand began to shake. He knew that face. He'd seen it in the single photograph his mother kept, the one she'd hidden in her Bible and never talked about. The one Tom had found after she died and carried with him for years, before losing it somewhere in Nevada or New Mexico, one of those places where he'd drunk too much and woken up with less than he'd started with. This was his mother, Rosa Herrera. Young, before life had worn her down, before whatever had happened to send her running. Tom set the photograph down carefully and picked up another. Same girl, a few years older now, standing next to an older couple, her parents, Tom assumed, his grandparents, people he'd never met, never even known existed. He moved along the shelf, finding more photographs. Rosa as a child, Rosa as a teenager. Rosa with friends, with family at celebrations Tom couldn't name, a whole life documented, a whole history he'd never been told. And then, on the bottom shelf, he found the box. It was made of dark wood, carved with initials R, H plus MC, Rosa Herrera, and someone with the initials MC. Tom's father had been a mystery his entire life. His mother had never spoken of him, not once. When Tom asked as a child, she'd simply said, "He's gone. That's all you need to know." When he'd pressed, she'd gotten angry, and he'd learned not to ask. But here, apparently, were answers. Tom lifted the box from the shelf. It was heavier than expected, solid and well made. The lid opened smoothly, revealing contents wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture and time. He unwrapped the first bundle. Letters, dozens of them, tied with string, addressed to Rosa in a careful masculine hand. The return address was this house, Casa Herrera. The second bundle, a journal, leather-bound, the pages filled with entries in the same handwriting as the letters. The third, more photographs, but these showed a man, thin, intense, with dark eyes and darker hair. In some photos he stood alone, in others he was with Rosa, their bodies close, their expressions suggesting something between love and desperation. Tom sat down on the dusty floor, the box in his lap, and opened the journal to the first page. The entry was dated the 3rd of March, 1973. "My name is Miguel Cervantes, and I am writing this because I may not have much time left. If you are reading this, you are likely my son, Tomas, and you deserve to know the truth about who I was and why I had to disappear." Tom's hands trembled as he held the journal. The words blurred, refocused, blurred again. "My son, Tomas, after 61 years of wondering, of constructing elaborate fantasies and then abandoning them." Here it was the truth written in ink that had somehow survived 4 decades in this sealed room. He read on, his throat tight. "I met your mother in Piedras Negras when she was 16, and I was 24. I was already working for the organization then, though she didn't know it. Nobody knew except the men I reported to. That was the nature of my work, invisibility, numbers, the quiet management of money that flowed like blood through the border. I kept books, I balanced accounts. I made sure that what needed to disappear, disappeared. On paper, I was an accountant for a legitimate import business. In reality, I tracked the movement of drugs, weapons, and cash for the Sinaloa corridor operations." Tom had to stop reading. He set the journal down on the floor beside him and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. His father, the man whose absence had defined his entire life, had been Cartel. Not muscle, not an enforcer, but something arguably worse, the one who made it all work, who kept the machinery running smoothly. He picked up the journal again. His father's handwriting was neat, precise, the letters of a man accustomed to accuracy. I loved Rosa from the first moment I saw her. She was helping her father at the market, selling vegetables from their small farm. She had this way of moving, this quiet grace, and when she looked at me, it felt like the first honest thing I'd experienced in years. I courted her properly, or as properly as a man with my secrets could. Her parents didn't approve, they knew something was wrong with me, even if they couldn't name it, but Rosa was stubborn. She chose me anyway. Tom remembered his mother's stubbornness. It was one of the few clear memories he had, the set of her jaw when she'd made up her mind, the way she'd pushed through obstacles through sheer force of will. She'd raised him alone, worked 2 jobs, kept them fed, and housed even when it seemed impossible. That same stubbornness, apparently, had led her to marry a cartel accountant. We were married in 1971. Small ceremony. Her parents came, but barely spoke to me. They knew. Somehow they knew. And they were right to worry. I thought I could keep my 2 lives separate, the family man and the man who counted blood money. For a while I did. I rented this house, the old Herrera estate that had belonged to Rosa's grandfather before he died. It had been empty for years, falling apart, but I fixed it up, made it beautiful again. Rosa loved it here. She planted gardens, hung curtains, turned these rooms into a home. When she told me she was pregnant with you, I promised her I would leave the organization. I promised I would find legitimate work. I promised we would be safe. Tom closed his eyes. He could imagine it, his young mother, pregnant and hopeful, believing in her husband's promises. The same way Tom himself had believed in things over the years, before life taught him that promises were just words that disappeared like smoke. But leaving isn't simple. I knew too much. I'd seen too much. The ledgers I kept documented everything: routes, contacts, payoffs, the names of officials on both sides of the border who looked the other way. I was insurance for the organization, a walking record of their operations. They couldn't let me walk away. When I tried, when I told them I was done, they made it clear what would happen. Not to me, to Rosa. To you, even though you hadn't been born yet. They would hurt the people I loved if I didn't continue. Tom felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. This was the story he'd expected, the one he'd constructed in his darkest moments, a father who'd abandoned them, who'd chosen his own interests over his family. Except it wasn't quite that simple. It never was. So I made a different choice. I copied everything, every ledger, every name, every transaction from the previous 5 years. I documented it all in duplicate records that I kept hidden here, in this room. I built a case that could destroy the entire network if it ever came to light. And then I made contact with the DEA. Tom's breath caught. He read the sentence again to make sure he'd understood correctly. His father had been an informant, a snitch. In the world, Tom had moved through the borderlands, the ranches, the bars where men spoke in low voices about things the law couldn't touch, that was worse than being cartel. That was betrayal of the deepest kind. Agent Richard Moss, that was the DEA contact's name. I met him 6 times over 3 months, always in different places, always careful. I gave him enough information to make arrests, to shut down operations, but I held back the most damaging evidence. I told him I needed guarantees: first, witness protection for Rosa, for you when you were born, new identities, a life somewhere far from here. He promised me everything. We had a date set, the 15th of April, 1973. I would turn over all the records, testify if needed, and we would disappear. Tom found the next entry, dated the 8th of March, 1973. They know. I don't know how they found out, but they know. I saw the way Hector looked at me today when I delivered the monthly reports. He knows. Maybe someone saw me with Moss. Maybe Moss isn't as clean as he claims. Maybe I just made a mistake, one small slip in 5 years of careful deception. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that I'm running out of time. Rosa is 8 months pregnant. You could be born any day. I can't wait for April 15th. I have to get them out now. The handwriting had changed, subtly less neat, more rushed. Tom could feel his father's fear bleeding through the ink. I sent Rosa to El Paso today. Told her it was just for a few days, that I had business to handle and wanted her somewhere safe. She didn't want to go. She knew something was wrong. But she went. She took a bus north with just a suitcase. And I watched her go, knowing I might never see her again. Tomorrow, I'll contact Moss. Tell him the timeline has changed. Tomorrow, I'll get the records to him. And then, I'll run. I'll meet Rosa in El Paso, and we'll disappear together before anyone can stop us. The next page was blank. Tom flipped forward. More blank pages. He checked the dates on the letters, spreading them out on the floor. The last letter was dated the 9th of March, 1973. My dearest Rosa, if you are reading this, I am already gone. I am so sorry. I tried to build us a life, and instead I built a trap. I loved you more than anything in this world. I love our son, even though I will never meet him. Tell him I tried. Tell him his father tried to be a better man than he was. All the evidence is here, hidden in this room. Maybe someday it will mean something. Maybe someday justice will find these men. But for now, you need to run. Take our son and run. Don't come back here. Don't trust anyone. Live quietly. Keep him safe. That's all I ask. That's all I can give you now. I love you. I'm sorry. Miguel. Tom sat in the dusty silence, the letter in his hands, his father's final words echoing in his mind. He'd never met Miguel Cervantes. Never heard his voice, never felt his hand on his shoulder. But now, holding these pages, he felt the weight of a father's love and a father's failure in equal measure. His mother had read this letter. She'd come to this house, found this room, understood what had happened, and then she'd done exactly what Miguel had asked she'd run. She'd kept Tom safe. She'd never come back, and she'd never told him the truth. Tom looked around the sealed room, at the shelves filled with his family's history, at the life his parents had tried to build. Somewhere in here, if his father's words were true, was evidence that could destroy a cartel operation, evidence that had been hidden for 4 decades, evidence that Javier Soto probably knew about. The realization hit him like cold water. The $1 sale, the insistence that Tom live here, maintain the property, establish residency. Soto hadn't been doing him a favor. Soto had been positioning him a Herrera, blood family, someone with a legitimate claim to the property and everything in it. Tom was bait, or insurance, or both. He stood up slowly, his knees protesting. Through the doorway, he could see the late afternoon sun painting the hallway gold. Outside, his truck waited. He could leave right now. Drive away, abandon this house and its secrets, return to the anonymous life he'd been living. But his father's words stayed with him. Tell him I tried. For the first time in his life, Tom wanted to know the man who'd written those words. He wanted to understand the choices Miguel Cervantes had made, the love that had driven him, the fear that had killed him. And maybe, after 61 years of running, it was time for Tom to try too. Tom spent the night in his truck, the doors locked, the rifle within reach. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by sounds that might have been wind through the old house, or might have been something else. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's handwriting, heard his mother's voice saying, "He's gone. That's all you need to know." She'd known everything. She'd read that journal, held those letters, understood exactly what had happened, and she'd spent the rest of her life protecting Tom from that knowledge, keeping him ignorant and therefore safe. When dawn broke grey and cool, Tom climbed out of the truck and stretched his back. His body ached from sleeping in the cramped cab, but his mind was clear. He had decisions to make. He walked the property in the early light, seeing it differently now. 20 acres of scrubland and overgrown gardens bordered by barbed wire that had mostly rusted away. A few old outbuildings, a shed, a barn with a collapsed roof, what looked like it might have been a guest house once. The land sloped gently down toward a dry creek bed that probably ran during the rainy season. It was isolated. The nearest neighbor was at least 2 miles away, hidden behind a rise of mesquite-covered hills. The dirt road that led to the main highway was barely visible, more a suggestion of passage than an actual route. Someone could come here and never be seen. Someone could disappear here and never be found. Tom suspected that's exactly what had happened to Miguel Cervantes. He returned to the house as the sun climbed higher. The sealed room looked different in daylight, less like a tomb and more like an archive. He began methodically examining everything on the shelves, taking inventory of what his father had left behind. The photographs documented a life. Miguel and Rosa's wedding, a small gathering in what looked like a church courtyard. Rosa pregnant, standing in front of this very house, her hand on her swollen belly. Miguel, at work, wearing a suit, sitting at a desk, covered in papers, casual shots. Of the two of them, capturing stolen moments of happiness. The letters were love notes mostly, written during the brief periods when Miguel traveled for work. They were tender, revealing a man who felt deeply even as he lived a double life. Tom found himself reading them slowly, getting to know this father through his words to the mother Tom barely remembered. But it was the documents that made Tom's hands shake. Behind the personal items, hidden in boxes at the back of the lowest shelf, he found what Miguel had described: ledgers. Dozens of them, covering the years 1968 through early 1973. They were meticulous records, written in a combination of codes and plain language that Tom could partially decipher. Names, dates, quantities, routes, payments. The infrastructure of drug trafficking laid bare in neat columns of figures. Tom wasn't naive. He'd spent his life in the borderlands, had worked ranches where hands didn't ask questions about the trucks that came through at night, had drunk in bars where certain men commanded certain kinds of respect. He knew how things worked. But seeing it documented like this, seeing the scope of it, was different. This wasn't just border smuggling. This was industrial-scale trafficking involving hundreds of people, millions of dollars, networks that stretched from Colombia to Chicago. And Miguel Cervantes had recorded it all. Tom sat back on his heels, staring at the boxes. This was what Soto wanted. This was why Tom had been brought here to find these records, to be the legitimate heir who could claim them, who could then be persuaded or forced to hand them over. Except Tom didn't know if the organization documented in these ledgers still existed. 40 years was a long time in the drug trade. Cartels rose and fell, territories shifted, leadership changed. The men whose names appeared in these pages were probably dead or retired or imprisoned. The routes described were likely obsolete, unless the basic structure remained. Unless the networks Miguel had documented were still there, just under new management, unless these records could still do damage. Tom needed information. He needed to understand what he was holding and what it meant in the present day, not just the past. He gathered the most recent ledger and several of the letters, placed them in his truck, and drove into town. Del Rio was 40 minutes away, a border city that straddled two worlds. Tom found a library, the kind of place he'd rarely entered in his years of drifting, but which now seemed like the safest space to do research. He sat at a computer terminal, his hands clumsy on the keyboard, and began searching. Miguel Cervantes, 1973. Disappeared. Missing. DEA. The search turned up nothing. Whatever had happened to his father hadn't made the news, or if it had, the records weren't digitized or were buried too deep for Tom's limited skills to find. He tried a different approach. Sinaloa Cartel. 1970 seconds. History. That produced results. Pages and pages of them. Articles, documentaries, academic papers. Tom skimmed through them, piecing together a picture. The Sinaloa operation in the early 70s had been smaller than it would later become, but it had been violent and efficient. Several accountants and money handlers from that era had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some were suspected of being informants. Others had simply fallen out of favor. The organization, Tom learned, had a long memory and little tolerance for betrayal. He looked up DEA operations from 1973 and found references to several arrests along the border, successful busts that had disrupted trafficking for brief periods. No mention of Miguel Cervantes. But then there wouldn't be. Informants were protected, their names never released, unless they were killed before they could testify. Tom printed several articles, paying for the pages with precious dollars from his dwindling funds. He gathered them carefully and left the library, feeling exposed in the bright midday sun. He stopped at a gas station and bought a prepaid cell phone with the last of his money. He'd lived for years without a phone, without any way for the world to reach him, but now he needed to be reachable. If Soto called, Tom wanted to know what was being said. As if summoned by the thought, the old phone Tom had buried in his glove compartment, a flip phone he'd kept but never used, began to ring as he sat in the truck. He didn't recognize the number. He answered anyway. "Tom." Soto's smooth voice filled the cab. "How are you settling in?" Tom kept his voice neutral. "Fine. Good. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you have everything you need. The house, it's what you expected." "It's a wreck," Tom said, "but I've seen worse. Of course, you're a capable man. I'm sure you'll make something good out of it." A pause. "Have you explored the property thoroughly? Sometimes old houses have surprises, hidden things." There it was. Not even subtle. Tom looked at the ledger sitting on the seat beside him. "I'm still getting my bearings. Takes time to understand a place." "Time, yes." Soto's voice cooled slightly. "Take the time you need, but not too much time. The property has been empty for 40 years. It would be good to see it properly occupied again, properly maintained. Perhaps you'll find things that need to be preserved. Family things, important things. If I do," Tom said carefully, "I'll know. I'm certain you will. You're a Herrera, after all. This is your inheritance. Whatever you find there belongs to you." Another pause, weighted with meaning. "We should talk soon, Tom. In person. There are opportunities here. Ways I could help you, and ways you could help me. Mutually beneficial arrangements." "Maybe," Tom said. "Don't take too long to decide. Opportunities have expiration dates." Soto hung up without saying goodbye. Tom sat in the truck, staring at the silent phone. The message was clear. Find the records, hand them over, accept whatever deals Soto was offering, or face whatever consequences came with refusal. Tom started the engine and drove back to the house, his mind working through possibilities. He could run, sell the truck, hitchhike east or north, disappear into America's vast spaces the way he always had. He could destroy the records, burn them, scatter the ashes, eliminate the evidence and the danger in one gesture. Or he could do what his father had tried to do. He could find a way to make this mean something. Tom spent the next 3 days making the house livable. He cleared debris, swept floors, fixed what could be fixed with the tools he had. He worked from dawn until dark, pushing his body hard, trying to quiet his mind with physical labor. But every time he walked past the sealed room, now standing open, he felt the weight of those ledgers pressing on him. On the 4th morning, a truck pulled up the dirt road. Tom was on the roof, replacing tiles he'd scavenged from the collapsed barn. When he heard the engine, he climbed down slowly, reaching for the rifle he now kept close at all times. But it wasn't Soto. An old Ford pickup, even more battered than Tom's, came to a stop in front of the house. The driver who climbed out was a woman, maybe 70, with silver hair pulled back in a braid and skin weathered to the texture of good saddle leather. She wore jeans, boots, and a work shirt, and she moved with the deliberate care of someone whose body had earned its aches. "You're Tom Herrera," she said, not a question like Soto. But her voice was different, direct, no hidden edges. "I am." "Thought so. You look like Rosa." She studied him with sharp brown eyes. "I'm Elena Marquez. I own the property 2 miles east. Been there since 1980. Tom relaxed slightly, but didn't put down the rifle. "What can I do for you?" "Can do for each other, more like." Elena gestured to the house. "This place has been too empty my whole time here. Now, suddenly there's smoke from the chimney, a truck in the drive. Figured I should introduce myself. Also figured I should warn you." "Warn me about what?" "About who sold you this property." Elena's expression hardened. "Javier Soto. He's not a good man, Tom. Whatever deal he made with you, it's not what it seems." Tom set the rifle against the porch railing. "I'm beginning to understand that." "Good. You're smarter than you look." Elena's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Mind if I come in? I've got things to tell you, and I'm too old to have conversations standing in the sun." Tom hesitated, then nodded. He led her inside, cleared off 2 chairs in what had been the dining room, and offered her water from the jug he'd been drinking from. Elena accepted the water and drank deeply. Then she looked around the room, her gaze distant, remembering. "I knew your mother, you know. Not well, but I knew her." Tom felt something tighten in his chest. "You knew Rosa?" "Saw her a few times, back in 72, 73. I was younger then, working as a nurse in Piedras Negras. She came to the clinic once when she was pregnant with you. I remembered her because she seemed so frightened. Not of having a baby, of everything else." Elena paused. "She asked me once if I knew how to disappear, how to become someone else. I didn't understand what she meant then. I think I do now. Did you know my father, Miguel?" "Only by reputation. He was careful, kept a low profile. But people talk, especially in small communities. There were rumors about what he did, who he worked for. Most folks stayed away from him. Your mother, she was brave or foolish, depending on how you look at it. Probably both." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Soto's been asking questions about this property for years, about who owned it, what happened here, what might still be here. He's connected, Tom, not just Cartel he's got. Legitimate businesses, political connections, law enforcement in his pocket. He's untouchable in the ways that matter. And if he sold you this house for $1, it's because he wants something that's worth a hell of a lot more." "I know," Tom said quietly. Elena studied him. "Do you? Do you really?" "Because the men Soto works for, they don't negotiate, they don't compromise. If you have something they want, they'll take it. And if you get in the way—" She left the sentence unfinished. Tom thought about the ledgers in the sealed room, about 40 years of secrets waiting to be uncovered. What if what's here could hurt them? What if it could bring them down? "Then they'll make sure you never get the chance to use it." Elena's voice was flat, certain. "You're one man, Tom. One old cowboy with no money, no connections, no power. They'll bury you in the desert, and no one will ever know." "My father tried," Tom said. "He tried to do the right thing. And where is he now?" Elena's question hung in the air, unanswerable. Tom stood and walked to the window, looking out at the scraggly land, the broken fences, the endless horizon. "I can't just walk away. This is—" he struggled for the words. "This is the only thing I have of him. The only proof he existed, that he tried. If I run now, it's like saying none of it mattered." "It doesn't matter," Elena said, but her voice was gentler now. "Not to men like Soto. Not to the organizations that grind up people like your parents. The only thing that matters is staying alive." "I've been alive for 61 years, Tom said. "Can't say it's amounted to much." Elena was quiet for a moment, then she stood and walked to join him at the window. "Your mother ran. She spent her life running, keeping you safe. That took courage. That took strength. Don't throw away her sacrifice for some misguided idea of justice or revenge." Tom looked at her. "What would you do?" "Me?" Elena laughed, a dry sound. "I'd burn it, all, and leave. But I'm not you. And I didn't just find out my father was murdered for trying to do the right thing." She put a hand on his arm, brief and firm. "Whatever you decide, Tom, decide fast. Soto's patient, but he won't wait forever. And when he comes, and he will come, you need to have a plan." She left soon after, her truck rumbling back down the dirt road. Tom watched until the dust settled, then returned to the sealed room. He pulled out the ledgers again, spreading them across the floor. Names, dates, routes, evidence of crimes committed decades ago. But as he studied them more carefully, patterns emerged. Certain names appeared repeatedly, certain routes stayed consistent, and some of those names, when he searched them on his new phone, were still active, still powerful, still operating. The structure Miguel had documented hadn't disappeared. It had evolved, adapted, grown. The men at the top might be different, but the system remained. And these ledgers, if properly interpreted and connected to current operations, could still do damage. Tom thought about his father sitting in this room, documenting everything, believing that information could be a weapon. He thought about his mother, reading that final letter, making the choice to run. He thought about his own life, 61 years of drifting, of avoiding connection, of running from everything that might tie him down. Maybe it was time to stop running. He gathered the ledgers and placed them carefully back in their boxes. Then he pulled out a notebook and began to make lists. What he knew, what he needed to know, what resources he had, what resources he needed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Outside, the sun moved across the sky. The house settled around him with creaks and sighs, and somewhere in the distance, Tom imagined he could hear his father's voice, reading from that journal. "Tell him I tried." "I hear you," Tom said aloud to the empty room. "I'm trying too." Tom's research became an obsession. Every evening, after working on the house, he drove to the library and spent hours at the computer, tracing names from his father's ledgers through decades of news articles, court records, and business filings. The work was slow, frustrating, full of dead ends and encrypted meanings, but patterns emerged. The Sinaloa corridor operations that Miguel had documented had fractured in the 80s, splintered into competing factions during the 90s, then reconsolidated under new leadership in the 2000s. Some of the original family names persisted, sons running operations their fathers had started, nephews inheriting territories from uncles. The business had become more sophisticated, more violent, more entrenched in legitimate commerce. And Javier Soto's name appeared in connection with several of those families. Tom learned that Soto owned import-export businesses, construction companies, and a chain of restaurants along the border, all legitimate on paper, all perfect vehicles for money laundering and logistic support. Soto was what the articles called a facilitator, someone who existed in the grey space between legal commerce and criminal enterprise, someone who made himself valuable to both sides, the kind of man who would have use for historical records that could implicate his business partners. Tom was leaving the library one evening when he noticed the car, a black SUV with tinted windows, parked across the street. It had been there when he arrived 2 hours ago. When Tom climbed into his truck, the SUV's engine started. He drove carefully, watching his mirrors. The SUV followed at a distance, not bothering to hide. Tom took the long route back to the house, testing whether they'd continue to follow or break off. They stayed with him the entire way, only turning around when Tom pulled onto his property. The message was clear. "We know where you are. We know what you're doing. We're watching." Tom didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, he found Elena's truck parked in front of his house again. She was sitting on his porch, 2 thermoses of coffee beside her. "Figured you could use some company," she said when Tom emerged. "And some decent coffee. That instant shit you're drinking tastes like dirt." Tom accepted a cup and sat beside her. The coffee was strong and good. They drank in silence for a while, watching the sun paint the horizon orange and gold. "They're following me," Tom said finally. "I know. Saw the SUV when I drove in yesterday. They're not subtle." "They don't need to be," Elena nodded. "You getting close to something?" Tom considered how much to tell her. She'd warned him, helped him, shown him kindness in a situation where he had no claim to it. But involving her further felt dangerous. "I'm trying to understand what my father left behind," he said carefully. "Trying to decide if it means anything. And does it? Maybe. I don't know yet." Tom turned to look at her. "Why are you helping me, Elena? You don't know me. This isn't your fight." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "I had a daughter once, Lucia. She was 23 when the cartels took her. Wrong place, wrong time. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see. They made sure she couldn't talk about it." Her voice was steady, but Tom heard the weight beneath it. That was 30 years ago. Long time to carry anger. Long time to wish you could do something, anything, to make them pay. "I'm sorry," Tom said, and meant it. "Me too." Elena sipped her coffee. "I can't bring her back. Can't change what happened. But if you've got a way to hurt the men who do these things, who take and never face consequences, I want to help. Even if it's just bringing you coffee and keeping you company." Tom felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent so long alone, keeping everyone at arm's length, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside him. "There might be a way," he said slowly, "but it's dangerous, and I'm not even sure it'll work. Tell me." So Tom did. He told her about the ledgers, about his father's documentation, about the connections he'd been tracing. He told her about Soto's phone call and the implications behind it. He didn't show her the actual evidence that seemed too much, too risky, but he gave her enough to understand what he was working with. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You need a lawyer," she said finally. "Someone who knows how to use evidence like this, someone who can't be bought. Do those exist?" "A few. Maybe." Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "I know someone. Federal prosecutor, retired now. She worked border cases for 20 years before she burned out and moved to Austin. Her name is Patricia Reyes. She's honest, stubborn honest, the kind that got her in trouble with her own office. If anyone would know what to do with your father's records, it's her. Will she help? I can ask." "But Tom," Elena's expression was serious, "once you reach out to someone like that, once you make this official, there's no going back. The people watching you will know, and they'll act." Tom thought about his father, sitting in this house 40 years ago, making the same calculations, reaching out to Agent Richard Moss, planning to disappear with Rosa and their unborn son, and then vanishing before any of it could happen. "My father tried to do this right," Tom said. "He tried to go through channels, work with the DEA, make it official, and they killed him before he could. So, what will you do differently?" Tom looked at the house behind him, at the land his father had loved, at the evidence still hidden in that sealed room. "I won't wait. I won't give them time to plan. If I'm going to do this, I do it fast, and I do it loud. Make it public enough that killing me won't make it go away." Elena studied him. "That's assuming you can get it public before they stop you." "That's what I'm assuming." She nodded slowly, something like respect crossing her face. "All right then. Let me call Patricia. See if she's interested in one last case." They spent the rest of the morning planning. Elena made her calls while Tom continued working on the house, maintaining the appearance of normalcy, But his mind was racing, calculating timelines, considering approaches, preparing for the moment when Soto's patience ran out. That moment came sooner than expected. Tom was in the sealed room that afternoon, photographing pages of the ledgers with his cheap phone, when he heard vehicles approaching. Not one engine, multiple. He moved to the window. 3 SUVs were making their way up the dirt road, moving fast, kicking up dust. Tom recognized the lead vehicle, the black one that had followed him from the library. They were done watching. They were coming to collect. Tom grabbed the most recent ledger, stuffed it inside his shirt, and ran for the back door. He could hear truck doors slamming, voices shouting in Spanish. They were surrounding the house. He made it to his truck, started the engine, and floored it toward the back of the property. Behind him, he heard gunfire, warning shots, probably meant to stop him. He didn't stop. He crashed through the sagging fence line and onto the open scrubland, his truck bouncing violently over rough terrain. In his rearview mirror, he saw 2 of the SUVs giving chase. Tom had spent 40 years running. He'd gotten good at it. But this time, he wasn't just running away. He was running toward something, toward Patricia Reyes, toward justice, toward whatever ending his father had been denied. His phone buzzed in his pocket. "Eleanor," he answered on speaker. "They're here." "I know." Patricia said, "Yes. She's waiting for you in Austin. I'm texting you the address." Elena's voice was tight. "Tom, don't stop. Don't slow down. Whatever happens, you get that evidence to her." "I will. Promise me." Tom looked at the ledger pressed against his chest, thought about his father's neat handwriting documenting crimes, his mother's fierce protection, all the years he'd wasted running from nothing instead of toward something. "I promise," he said, and drove faster into the gathering dusk. The scrubland at dusk was treacherous, uneven ground, hidden by shadows, rocks that could shred tires, arroyos that appeared without warning. Tom's truck bucked and fishtailed, the suspension screaming, but he kept the accelerator pressed to the floor. Behind him, the SUVs were better equipped for rough terrain, closing the distance steadily. He crashed through mesquite thickets, following the dry creek bed that ran along the edge of his property. The SUVs followed, their headlights bouncing wildly. Tom could hear their engines, powerful and relentless. His phone rang again. Not Elena. This time, a number he didn't recognize. He answered anyway. "Yeah." "Tom Herrera." Soto's voice was cold, stripped of its earlier civility. "You're making a mistake. Seems to be a family trait. Pull over. Right now. We can still talk about this. We can still make a deal." Tom laughed, a harsh sound. "Like the deal you made with my father?" Silence on the line. Then, "Your father was careless. He made promises he couldn't keep to people who didn't care about his intentions. I'm offering you something better. Money, protection, a chance to walk away from this." "Walk away with what? My life? That's not much of an offer. It's more than your father got." Tom felt rage surge through him, hot and clarifying. "You killed him, or someone like you did. He was trying to protect his family, and you people murdered him for it. He was trying to destroy an organization that provides livelihoods for thousands of families," Soto said, his voice hard. "He was going to put good people in prison, disrupt operations that communities depend on. He wasn't a hero, Tom. He was a traitor who got what traitors get. Then I guess I'm a traitor too. You don't have to be. Pull over, give me the ledgers. Take the money I'm offering and go live whatever life you want, somewhere far from here. That's your chance. Your only chance." Tom saw the turn he'd been looking for, the old ranch road that connected to Highway 90. If he could reach it, if he could get onto pavement with other traffic witnesses, he might have a chance. "My father tried to make a deal," Tom said. "Tried to do it the right way. And where's he now? Where's the DEA agent who promised him protection? Where's the justice system that was supposed to save him?" "There is no justice," Soto said. "There's only power, and you don't have any." Tom ended the call and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. The ranch road was ahead, barely visible in the failing light. He aimed for it, his truck shuddering with the effort. The first SUV tried to cut him off, swinging wide to block his path. Tom didn't slow down. He aimed for the gap between the SUV and a stand of mesquite, betting everything on his truck's narrower profile. Metal screamed against wood, thorns scraped paint, and then he was through, bouncing onto the graded dirt of the ranch road. The SUVs couldn't follow as easily. They had to find their own paths through the scrub, losing precious seconds. Tom used those seconds to put distance between them, racing toward the highway that represented safety, or at least witnesses. His truck's engine was overheating, the temperature gauge climbing into red territory. The suspension made ominous clanking sounds. But the highway was close now. He could see the occasional flash of headlights in the distance. A gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. Not warning shots this time. Real bullets, meant to stop him permanently. One round punched through his rear windshield, spraying glass across the cab. Another took out his side mirror in a burst of plastic and metal. Tom ducked instinctively, trying to make himself a smaller target while keeping the truck on the road. The engine's death rattle grew louder, steam began pouring from under the hood, the highway was half a mile ahead, the SUVs were 100 yards behind, Tom's truck was dying. He wasn't going to make it. The engine seized with a grinding scream. The truck lurched, lost power, and coasted to a stop. Tom grabbed the ledger from under his shirt, kicked open the door, and ran. The landscape here was more open, less cover. He sprinted toward a cluster of rocks and scrubby trees, knowing it wouldn't be enough, knowing he'd just traded a quick death by car for a slightly slower death on foot. The SUVs screeched to a stop around his disabled truck. Doors opened. Men emerged, 4, 5, 6 of them, silhouettes against their headlights. They had guns, were spreading out, were coming for him with the casual confidence of predators who'd caught their prey. Tom made it to the rocks, pressed himself against the largest one, and pulled out his grandfather's rifle. It was a hunting weapon, single shot, elegant but impractical for a firefight. He had maybe 5 rounds in his pocket. Against 6 armed men, that wasn't enough. But it was what he had. Tom, Soto's voice carried across the distance. He'd gotten out of one of the SUVs, was standing in the glow of the headlights. This is pointless. You can't win. Give me the ledger and I'll let you walk away. You have my word. Tom didn't bother responding. Soto's word was worth exactly what his father's life had been worth. Nothing. I'm trying to be reasonable. Soto called. This doesn't have to end badly. Your father, he made choices that forced our hand, but you can make different choices. Better choices. Tom checked the rifle, made sure a round was chambered. His hands were surprisingly steady. Maybe, at 61, after a lifetime of running, he'd finally run out of fear. We're coming in, Soto said. Last chance. The men advanced, moving tactically, using cover, approaching from multiple angles. They were professionals. Tom was an old cowboy with a hunting rifle and nothing left to lose. The odds were clear. And then headlights appeared on the highway, bright and fast, turning onto the ranch road. Not one vehicle, 3, 4, 5 of them, moving with purpose. They had light bars on their roofs, unmistakable even at a distance. Police, or border patrol, or something. The advancing men froze, looked back at Soto. Soto stood rigid in the headlights, his expression invisible but his body language screaming frustration. The arriving vehicles screeched to a stop between Tom's position and the SUVs. Doors opened. People emerged in tactical gear, weapons raised, voices shouting commands in English and Spanish. But they weren't police uniforms. They were plainclothes with federal credentials. And the woman who stepped forward, older but moving with authority, had silver hair pulled back severe and eyes that had seen everything twice. Javier Soto, she called out, her voice carrying clear and hard. Federal arrest warrant? Tell your men to put down their weapons. Tom stayed behind his rock, not sure if he was being rescued or if this was just a different kind of trap. The woman saw him and called out, "Tom Herrera! I'm Patricia Reyes. Elena sent me. Are you hurt?" Tom stood slowly, still holding the rifle, still not quite believing. "I'm fine. The ledger?" He held it up. Reyes smiled, fierce and satisfied. "Then I'd say we're in business." Soto and his men were surrounded now, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. They lowered their weapons slowly, hands visible, faces showing the calculation of men trying to figure out how this had gone so wrong so fast. Tom walked toward Reyes, his legs shaking with delayed adrenaline. He handed her the ledger. She opened it, flipped through pages, and her smile grew wider. "Your father kept good records. He tried to do the right thing," Tom said. "So do you." Reyes closed the ledger carefully. "Let's finish what he started." The federal building in Austin was exactly what Tom expected. Institutional beige walls, fluorescent lights, the smell of old coffee and new bureaucracy. Reyes had brought him here after Soto's arrest, after statements were taken at the scene, after Tom's truck was impounded as evidence, and he'd ridden in silence for 3 hours in an unmarked sedan. Now he sat in a conference room, the ledger open on the table between them, and watched Reyes study his father's handwriting with an expression Tom couldn't quite read. "This is remarkable," she said finally. "Do you understand what you have here? This isn't just historical documentation. These family names, these roots, these networks, they're still active. The structure your father recorded in 1973 is essentially the same structure operating today. With this, we can trace current operations back to their roots. We can build cases that go beyond street-level arrests and hit the real power." Tom nodded, exhausted. He'd barely slept in days. His body ached from the chase, from tension, from 61 years of accumulated weariness. "That's what my father wanted. To make it count for something." Reyes looked up at him, and something in her expression shifted. "Tom, I need to tell you something. Before we go any further, you need to know." The way she said it made Tom's chest tighten. "Know what?" "I knew your father. Not well, but I knew him." Reyes closed the ledger carefully. "I was a junior prosecutor in 1973, fresh out of law school, assigned to work with the DEA on border cases. Richard Moss, the agent your father contacted, he was my case officer. I was part of the team that was supposed to bring Miguel in, get his testimony, build the prosecution." Tom went very still. "You were there. I was there. I remember the meetings we had, planning how to handle the evidence, how to protect the informant, how to structure the arrests. Miguel was supposed to meet Moss on April 15th. When he didn't show, when we couldn't locate him, we assumed," she paused, "we assumed he'd gotten cold feet, that he'd taken his family and run. But that's not what happened." "No." Reyes's voice was heavy. "That's not what happened. We found out later, years later, when documents were declassified, that there had been a leak. Someone in law enforcement, someone we worked with, had tipped off the cartel. Miguel's cover was blown before he could deliver the evidence, before he could get to safety." Tom felt something cold spreading through his chest. "You knew. You knew he was killed because someone on your side betrayed him. We suspected. We couldn't prove it. The investigation went nowhere. People protected each other. Closed ranks. Miguel Cervantes became just another unsolved disappearance in a decade full of them." Reyes met his eyes. "I'm sorry. I've carried that failure for 50 years. When Elena called me, when she told me about you and what you'd found, I saw it as a chance to make things right, to finish what we started." Tom wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at this woman who'd been part of the system that failed his father. But he was too tired, and she looked too haunted by her own regrets. "Who was it?" he asked. "Who betrayed him?" "Richard Moss." The name landed like a stone. Tom stared at her. "The DEA agent? The one my father trusted?" Reyes nodded slowly. "We didn't know it then. Moss was clean on paper, had a good record, but in 1985 he was arrested for accepting cartel payments. Turned out he'd been compromised for years, feeding information both ways, protecting certain operations while allowing others to be busted. He went to prison, served 15 years, got out in 2000, disappeared after that. We don't know where he is now. Tom absorbed this. His father had died because he'd trusted the wrong person. Had thought he was dealing with law enforcement when he was really dealing with someone as corrupt as the cartel itself. "There's more," Reyes said quietly. "Something you need to see." She pulled out a folder, opened it, and slid a photograph across the table. It showed a man in his 70s, thin and grey, standing outside a building Tom didn't recognize. The photo looked recent. "That's Richard Moss," Reyes said. "Taken 3 months ago in Del Rio." Tom's blood went cold. "Del Rio, where Soto found me. Where Soto approached you in that cantina and offered you your father's house for $1. Reyes pulled out more photos. "These are surveillance shots from our investigation into Soto's network. Look at the third one." Tom looked. It showed Soto meeting with the man from the first photo, Richard Moss, outside what appeared to be a restaurant. They were shaking hands, smiling, comfortable with each other. "Moss works for Soto now," Reyes said. "Has for years, apparently. He's a consultant officially, helps with security, logistics. Unofficially, he's the one who identifies threats, handles problems, makes things disappear." She paused. "When Soto learned that the Herrera property was legally transferable to Miguel's heir to you, he needed someone who understood what might be hidden there. Someone who'd been there at the beginning." Tom felt his hands clench into fists. "Moss told him about the ledgers, told him what my father had documented. Almost certainly. And then Soto used that information to bait you. He knew you'd take the deal, $1 for a house, a chance to stop running. He knew you'd find the evidence, and then he'd pressure you to hand it over, or she didn't finish the sentence, or kill me like they killed my father." Tom stood up, paced to the window. Below, Austin traffic moved through downtown streets. Ordinary people, living ordinary lives, unaware of the history being excavated in this conference room. "There's something else," Reyes said. "Something in your father's journal that you might not have seen yet." She opened the ledger to a page marked with a sticky note. "This entry, dated March 7th, 1973. Your father writes about his final meeting with Moss, 2 days before everything went wrong. He mentions feeling uneasy, sensing something off in Moss's behavior. But then he writes this." She pointed to a specific line. Tom read, "Moss asked detailed questions about Rosa's family, about where she might go if things got dangerous. He wanted addresses, names of relatives, safe houses. At the time I thought he was being thorough, planning for our protection. Now I wonder if I said too much." Tom's stomach dropped. He was getting information to hunt them, to make sure my mother couldn't hide. Your father must have realized it too, because the next entry is about sending Rosa away immediately, not waiting for the planned extraction. Reyes closed the journal. "Miguel saved your mother's life by trusting his instincts. He got her out before Moss could act on that information." Tom returned to his chair, sat heavily. "My whole life, I thought my father abandoned us, that he was a criminal who got what criminals get. But he died trying to protect us. He died because he trusted someone who was supposed to help. Yes, and now that same man is working for the people who want these ledgers, the people who want to bury this history." "Yes." Tom looked at the ledger, at his father's careful handwriting, at the documented evidence of crimes spanning decades. He thought about Miguel sitting in that sealed room, recording everything, believing the truth mattered. He thought about Rosa running north with Tom growing inside her, building a new life from nothing, never looking back. He thought about Elena's daughter, taken by cartel violence, about all the families destroyed by The machinery Miguel had documented. About how many more would be hurt if this evidence stayed buried. "What do you need from me?" Tom asked. "Everything in that sealed room. All the ledgers, all the documents, every piece of evidence your father preserved. With your testimony about how you found it, about Soto's approach, about the pursuit, we can build something substantial. Not just arrests, but systemic prosecution. The kind that actually changes things." Tom nodded slowly. "And Moss?" Reyes's expression hardened. "Let me worry about Richard Moss. He's been walking free for too long. It's time he answered for what he did to your father." "I want to face him," Tom said, "before this is over. I want him to know what happened to the family he tried to destroy." "I can arrange that." Tom stood and extended his hand. Reyes shook it, her grip firm. "My father tried to do this alone," Tom said. "He thought he had support, but he was isolated. This time, I want to do it. Different. This time, I want everyone to know what's happening. I want it public, documented, impossible to bury." "Agreed." Reyes gathered the papers. "We'll coordinate with the media, bring in other agencies, build a coalition that can't be compromised. Your father's evidence will finally get the hearing it deserves." Tom looked at the ledger one more time. "He died for this." "He did, but you lived for it. And now you get to finish what he started." Reyes opened the door. "Let's go bring his work into the light." The next 72 hours moved with the controlled chaos of a military operation. Reyes assembled a team: federal prosecutors, FBI agents, forensic accountants, and investigators who specialized in cartel networks. Tom found himself at the center of it all, giving depositions, providing context, helping decode his father's notation system. They returned to the house together, a convoy of federal vehicles rolling up that dirt road like an invasion force. Tom watched. Agents photographed the sealed room, carefully catalog every document, every letter, every piece of evidence his father had preserved. They treated it with reverence, understanding they were touching history that could reshape current prosecutions. Elena came by while the work was happening. She brought food, homemade tamales and fresh coffee, and watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. "Your father would be proud," she told Tom as they stood on the porch, watching agents carry boxes to waiting vans. "I don't know what he'd think," Tom admitted. "I spent most of my life running from who I was. Hard to imagine him being proud of that." "You stopped running, that's what matters." Elena squeezed his shoulder. "You're finishing what he started. That takes a different kind of courage than starting in the first place." Tom wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at him. The doubt that had defined his adult life, the certainty that he'd always fall short, always fail when it mattered most. Reyes approached them, her expression grave. "We've got a problem." Tom's stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" "Richard Moss has disappeared. The moment Soto was arrested, Moss vanished. We've got people watching his known addresses, his associates, but he's gone dark." She paused. "He knows we're coming for him, and he knows what you represent. He'll try to stop the prosecution. He'll try to stop you." Reyes looked Tom in the eye. "You're the witness who connects everything, the property, the evidence, the chain of custody. Without your testimony about how you found the ledgers and what Soto told you, our case gets much weaker. Moss understands that. He's spent his career making problems disappear." Elena's face hardened. "Then we keep Tom protected. Put him somewhere safe, somewhere Moss can't reach. We are. Federal protective custody starting tonight. But there's something else." Reyes pulled out her phone, showed them a screenshot of a news article. "Someone leaked that we're building a case. It hit the press 2 hours ago. All the major outlets are running with it. Historic drug cartel evidence recovered. 40-year investigation reopened. That kind of thing. The story mentions you by name, Tom. Says you're the son of a murdered informant who's finally bringing his father's killers to justice." Tom read the article, his chest tight. "You said you wanted it public. that we'd coordinate with media. We were planning to go public on our terms in a week after we'd secured everything. This is premature. Someone jumped the gun, maybe trying to help, maybe trying to hurt. Either way, you're exposed now. Everyone knows who you are and what you're doing. Good, Tom said, surprising himself. Let them know. Let everyone know. Moss can't make me disappear if the whole country is watching. That's naive, Reyes said, but not unkindly. High-profile witnesses get killed all the time. The publicity might protect you, or it might just make your death more spectacular. Tom thought about his father, isolated and afraid, trusting the wrong person. My father tried to do this quietly. He tried to work through channels, trust the system, and the system betrayed him. If I'm going down, I'm going down loud. At least then, other people will know what happened. Reyes studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right. We do it loud. I'll arrange interviews, press conferences, full transparency. We'll make you too visible to quietly eliminate. But Tom, once we start this, there's no stopping. You'll be testifying against people who've killed for less. Your life won't be your own anymore. You understand that? I'm 61 years old. I've lived longer than my father did. If the rest of my time means something, that's more than I expected. Elena made a sound that might have been approval or concern. I'm coming with you. Wherever you're going, whatever safe house or protective custody, I'm coming to. Elena, don't argue with me. You'll need someone who knew your mother, who can testify about the history, about why Rosa ran. Plus, I'm a retired nurse. If someone does get through your protection, you'll want medical care. Her voice softened. And you'll need a friend. Someone who's not a federal agent or a prosecutor. Someone who's just there because they give a damn. Tom felt something warm in his chest, unfamiliar after decades of isolation. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Haven't kept you alive. That night, they moved Tom and Elena to a safe house outside San Antonio. It was a nondescript rental in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that attracted no attention. 4 agents rotated shifts, watching the perimeter, monitoring communications. Tom couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. His father had sat in rooms like this 50 years ago, knowing he was running out of time, wondering if the choices he'd made would protect the people he loved or doom them. Elena found him there, around 3 in the morning. She didn't say anything, just made tea and sat beside him. Tell me about my mother, Tom said finally. You said you knew her. What was she like? Elena was quiet for a moment, gathering memories. Strong. Quiet. Strong. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. She was young when I met her, but she had this way about her like she'd already seen hard things and decided not to let them break her. Your father loved her desperately. You could see it in how he looked at her, how he'd light up when she walked into a room. She never talked about him, not once. Can you blame her? She'd loved a man who brought danger into her life, who'd gotten killed for trying to do the right thing. That kind of loss, you either let it consume you or you wall it off completely. Your mother chose to wall it off, chose to focus on keeping you safe, giving you a life where you didn't have to carry his weight. But I carried it anyway, Tom said. Spent my whole life feeling like something was missing, like there was this hole where a father should have been. Maybe if she'd told me, then you might have gone looking for revenge when you were too young to handle it, or you might have gotten curious about that world, drawn into it. Your mother made the choices she thought would keep you alive and free. They weren't perfect choices, but they were the best she could do with what she had. Tom nodded, understanding even if it hurt. I never thanked her, never told her I knew how hard it was raising me alone. I just lit out the day after her funeral, couldn't stand to stay in that house with all her ghosts. You were 16 and scared, she understood. She'd done the same thing at 18. Elena sipped her tea. But now you're here, doing what she would have wanted, finishing what your father started. That's the thanks she needs. The next morning, Reyes arrived with news. They'd traced Moss through a credit card transaction he'd been careless, using a card at a gas station in Laredo. The FBI had him under surveillance, were waiting for the right moment to move in. "We can arrest him today," Reyes said. "But I wanted to give you a choice. We can do this quietly. Standard federal arrest. Process him through the system. Or," she paused, "we can arrange for you to be there when we bring him in. Let you face the man who got your father killed. It's irregular, and I can't promise what will happen. But if you want closure, if you want him to know who you are, we can make that happen." Tom didn't hesitate. "I want to be there." "I thought you might." Reyes checked her watch. "We move in 2 hours. Moss is staying at a motel outside Laredo. Small place, not many exits. We'll have it surrounded, no way for him to run. You'll stay back with me, protected, but you'll see everything. And afterward, if you want to, talk to him. I can arrange 5 minutes in the transport van. Supervised, recorded, completely official. 5 minutes is enough." Elena gripped his hand. "You sure about this?" Tom thought about his father's journal, about those last desperate entries. He thought about his mother, running north with a baby in her belly, never looking back. He thought about the life he'd lived, all those years of drifting, never understanding why he couldn't settle, couldn't connect, couldn't find peace. "I need to see his face," Tom said. "I need him to see mine. I need him to know that he failed, that the family he tried to destroy is still here, still fighting." Reyes nodded. "Then let's go finish this." They drove south as the sun climbed higher, a convoy of federal vehicles moving with purpose. Tom sat in the back seat, Elena beside him, watching the Texas landscape roll past. This was the same route his mother had taken 50 years ago, fleeing north toward an uncertain future. Now he was reversing that journey, heading back toward the past to finally put it to rest. The motel appeared on the horizon, a run-down strip of rooms along a frontage road, the kind of place where people paid cash and didn't ask questions. Reyes's team moved into position, blocking exits, setting up containment. Tom watched from a van parked 200 yards away, binoculars in hand. "Room 12, an agent's voice crackled over the radio. "Thermal shows single-occupant stationary." "Move in," Reyes ordered. 4 agents approached the door. One knocked, identified himself. Tom held his breath. The door opened. An old man stood there, thin and grey, wearing a cheap shirt and slacks. Richard Moss, the man who'd betrayed Tom's father. The man who'd spent 5 decades living with that betrayal, taking cartel money, making more people disappear. He didn't resist, didn't run, just put his hands up slowly and let them cuff him, his face showing resignation more than fear. They brought him to the van. Reyes gave Tom a look. "You ready?" Tom nodded. They opened the van's back door. Moss was inside, hands cuffed to a bench, an agent beside him. His eyes met Tom's, and something flickered there. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. Tom climbed in, sat across from him. The door closed, leaving them in dim light filtered through tinted windows. "You're Miguel's boy," Moss said. "Not a question." "I am." Moss looked at him for a long moment. "You look like him." Same eyes. He had honest eyes too. "Don't," Tom said, his voice hard. "Don't talk about him. Like you knew him. Like you cared." Moss's expression didn't change. "I did care. That's what made it harder. You betrayed him. You took cartel money and you told them he was cooperating. You got him killed. I saved your mother." Moss leaned forward slightly, as much as the cuffs would allow. "You think that was an accident?" "I told them where Miguel was hiding, but I steered them away from Rosa. I gave her time to run. I could have given them her El Paso address, her sister's place in Juarez. But I didn't. I let her disappear." Tom felt rage rising like bile. "You want credit for that? For not murdering my mother too? I want you to understand it wasn't simple. Nothing about that situation was simple. Moss's voice was tired, worn down by decades of carrying weight. Your father was going to bring down an organization that employed thousands of people, that provided income for entire communities. The people at the top were criminals, yes, but the people at the bottom, farmers, drivers, store owners who looked the other way, they were just trying to survive. Miguel's evidence would have destroyed all of that. Good. It should have been destroyed. Maybe, or maybe it would have just created a vacuum for something worse. You've seen what happened in the 80s, the 90s, the violence when cartels fight for territory. At least in 1973, there was stability. There were rules. Moss shook his head. I'm not saying I made the right choice. I'm saying it was more complicated than you think. Tom studied the old man across from him. Moss looked ancient, hollowed out, like he'd been carrying his crimes for so long they'd eaten him from the inside. There was no satisfaction in seeing him like this. No sense of justice served. My father trusted you, Tom said quietly. He put his life in your hands, and you sold him out for what money? Ideology? Fear? All of those things. And guilt. Moss looked away. I grew up in El Paso, Tom. I saw what poverty did to people, how desperation made them take risks. When the cartel approached me, when they offered me money to look the other way, I told myself I was still doing good work, that I could take their money and still make meaningful arrests, still protect people, that I could play both sides and somehow come out clean. But you didn't. No. I got deeper and deeper, until I couldn't tell which side I was really on. By the time Miguel came to me, I was already compromised. I should have turned him away, told him to find someone else. But I wanted to help him. I genuinely did. I thought maybe I could protect him, get him and his family out safely while still managing my other obligations. Your other obligations to the people who killed him. Moss met his eyes again. Yes. And when they found out, when someone above me got wind that Miguel was cooperating, I had to make a choice. Give them everything and maybe save Rosa, or protect Miguel and watch them kill everyone. You chose wrong. I chose survival, for me and for your mother. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just telling you what happened. Moss leaned back, the cuffs rattling. I've lived with it every day since. Watched you grow up from a distance, made sure no one came looking for you. When Soto found out about the property, about the evidence, I tried to steer him away from you. But he was determined. You work for Soto. Now, you've spent decades helping men like him. I work for Soto because I don't have any other choice. Once you're compromised, you're always compromised. They own you until you die, or they do. Moss looked old, exhausted. Your father was braver than me. He tried to break free, tried to do the right thing, even knowing what it might cost. I never had that courage. Tom felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, he would never forgive this man. But understanding, maybe. The recognition that Moss wasn't a monster, just a human who'd made terrible choices and then spent his life trapped by their consequences. The evidence my father collected, Tom said. It's going public, all of it. Reyes is building cases that will reach all the way to the top of these organizations. Everything my father died for, it's finally going to matter. Moss nodded slowly. Good, that's good. At least something comes out of all this. You'll go to prison. They'll charge you with obstruction, with my father's murder, with decades of corruption. I know. I'm ready. Moss looked at Tom with something like relief. I've been waiting for this for 50 years, waiting for someone to finally make me answer for what I did. I'm glad it's you. Glad Miguel's son is the one who brings me down. Tom stood, ready to leave. The 5 minutes were almost up. Tom, Moss said, your father, he loved you. He talked about you all the time, even before you were born. He wanted you to have a better life than he did. He wanted you to be free. I hope you are. Tom looked at the old man one last time. I'm trying to be. He climbed out of the van. Reyes was waiting, along with Elena. You okay? Elena asked. Tom nodded, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He's just a tired old man who made bad choices. He's not worth the hate I've been carrying." "Then let it go," Elena said. "Your father would want that." Tom watched as they drove Moss away toward whatever justice waited for him. The hate he'd imagined feeling, the rage, the satisfaction of revenge, it wasn't there. Just a quiet sadness for everyone the past had broken, and a determination to make sure the future was different. Reyes approached. "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow. National media, full disclosure. You ready to tell your story to the world?" Tom thought about his father's journal, about his mother's fierce protection, about his own decades of running. He thought about Elena standing beside him, about Patricia Reyes risking her career to make this right, about all the people who'd been hurt by the machinery his father had documented. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's finish this." The press conference room in the federal building was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters filled every seat, microphones bristled on the podium like a small forest. Tom stood backstage with Elena, watching through a gap in the curtains, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You don't have to. Do this," Elena said quietly. "Reyes can handle the press. You can stay anonymous, protected." "I want them to see me," Tom said. "I want everyone to know that Miguel Cervantes had a son, and that son is here to tell his father's story." Reyes appeared beside them. 2 minutes. "You remember what we discussed? Keep it simple. Focus on the facts. Don't speculate about things you can't verify." Tom nodded. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd faced down armed men, had survived decades of hard living, but standing in front of cameras and reporters felt more terrifying than any of that. "You'll be fine," Reyes said, and squeezed his shoulder. "Just tell the truth. That's all your father ever wanted." The announcement came. Reyes walked out first, took her position at the podium, and began speaking to the assembled press. Tom couldn't hear the words clearly over the blood pounding in his ears, but he saw the cameras swivel, saw reporters lean forward, saw the moment when the room realized this was bigger than a routine press briefing. Then Reyes gestured, and Tom walked out. The camera flashes were blinding. Tom stood next to Reyes, blinking, trying to focus. He dressed as well as he could, a borrowed button-down shirt, his cleanest jeans, his good boots. He looked exactly like what he was, an old cowboy who'd stumbled into history. Reyes introduced him. "This is Tomas Herrera, son of Miguel Cervantes and Rosa Herrera. 42 years ago, his father was murdered for attempting to expose a major drug trafficking operation. Today, Tom recovered the evidence his father died protecting, and we are reopening investigations into crimes that have gone unpunished for decades." She stepped back, giving Tom the microphone. He looked out at all those faces, all those cameras, all those people waiting for him to speak. His throat felt tight. He thought about his father, alone in that sealed room, writing by lamplight, documenting crimes because he believed truth mattered. He thought about his mother, carrying him north, building a life from nothing. He thought about Elena's daughter, and all the other lives taken by the violence his father had tried to stop. "My name is Tom Herrera," he said, and his voice was steadier than he expected. "I'm 61 years old. For most of my life I didn't know my father. I didn't know who he was, what he did, or why he disappeared. My mother never spoke about him. I grew up thinking he'd abandoned us, that he was just another deadbeat who couldn't handle responsibility." He paused, gathering himself. 3 weeks ago, I bought a house for $1. It was my father's house, the place where he lived with my mother before I was born. Inside, I found a sealed room, and in that room, I found my father's story. Tom pulled out the ledger, the one he'd kept safe through everything, the one that had almost gotten him killed. He held it up so the cameras could see. "This is one of dozens of ledgers my father kept. He was an accountant for a drug trafficking organization in the early 1970s. He documented everything: routes, names, payments, crimes, And when he realized what he was part of, when he understood the destruction this organization was causing, he decided to do something about it. Tom's voice grew stronger. He contacted the DEA. He copied all his records. He planned to testify, to bring down the entire operation. He was ready to give up everything, his home, his identity, his life, to do the right thing. But before he could testify, someone betrayed him. Someone he trusted told the cartel what he was planning, and they killed him. March 9th, 1973. He died trying to protect his family and stop criminals from hurting more people. The room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. For 40 years his evidence sat in that sealed room, waiting. The men he documented went on operating, got richer, got more powerful. They hurt more families. They killed more people. And no one knew that the proof of their crimes still existed. Tom looked directly into the cameras. My father's name was Miguel Cervantes. He was a good man who made a mistake working for bad people. But when he realized his mistake, he tried to fix it. He tried to make things right. And they murdered him for it. Today, I'm here to finish what he started. The evidence he collected is now in federal hands. Every name, every crime, every connection he documented, it's all being used to build cases against the people who thought they were untouchable. He set the ledger down on the podium. My father died believing that truth mattered, that justice was possible, that one person standing up could make a difference. I don't know if he was right, but I'm here to find out. For him, for my mother, for everyone else who's been hurt by the people he tried to stop. Tom stepped back. Reyes moved forward to field questions, but Tom didn't hear them. He walked off the bread. Stage, Elena, waiting for him, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt like his life finally meant something. Outside the federal building, the Texas sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. Tom stood on the steps, breathing in the warm air, watching cars pass on the street below. Normal people going about normal lives, most of them never knowing what had just happened in that press conference room. But some would know. The story would spread, his father's name would be known, and maybe, just maybe, some good would come from all this pain. Elena stood beside him. You did well in there. Did I? I can barely remember what I said. You told the truth. That's what mattered. She looked at him, her expression soft. What now? Tom thought about the question. What now? He'd finished what he came to do. He'd found his father's story, brought it to light, started the process of justice. But what came after? Where did a 61-year-old cowboy go when his life's purpose had been fulfilled? I don't know, he admitted. Haven't thought that far ahead. The house, Elena said. Your father's house. Are you going to keep it? Tom pictured the old adobe estate, the sealed room now empty, the land waiting for someone to care about it again. I think so. If I can. Seems wrong to let it go now that I know what it meant to him. Then you'll need help fixing it up. Good thing you know a stubborn old woman with construction experience. Tom smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. You offering to be my neighbor? Someone has to make sure you don't kill yourself trying to repair that roof. Reyes emerged from the building looking satisfied. That went well. Better than expected. The story's already hitting national news. By tomorrow, everyone in the country will know about Miguel Cervantes and the evidence he preserved. Will it be enough? Tom asked. Will it actually bring them down? Some of them, maybe not all. But it's a start. Reyes looked at him seriously. Your father's work is going to save lives, Tom. Investigations that have been stalled for decades are moving forward. People who thought they were safe are suddenly vulnerable. That's because of you. Because you didn't walk away when it would have been easier. Tom nodded, accepting the words even if he didn't quite believe them yet. What happens to me now? Protection for a while longer, until we're certain there's no retaliation. Then you're free to go back to your life, whatever that looks like. Reyes paused. Though I suspect your life is going to be very different from now on. She was right. Tom knew that. He could never go back to drifting, to the anonymous existence he'd lived for 40 years. His face was on national news, his story was public. For better or worse, he was Tom Herrera, son of Miguel Cervantes, the man who finished his father's fight. It was terrifying. It was also, somehow, exactly right. 6 months later, Tom stood on the porch of his father's house and watched the sunrise paint the Texas borderlands in shades of amber and rose. The house behind him was no longer crumbling. The roof was whole, the windows replaced, the vines cut back to reveal the adobe walls Miguel had once painted white. It wasn't perfect. Tom's budget and energy had limits, but it was solid. It was home. Elena arrived as the sun cleared the horizon, her truck rattling up the dirt road. She'd been coming every morning for weeks now, helping with the restoration work, making sure Tom ate properly, filling the silence with conversation when he needed it, and quiet when he didn't. "Coffee's ready," Tom called as she climbed out of the truck. "Good. I brought breakfast." She held up a bag of fresh pan dulce from the panaderia in Del Rio. "Figured you'd forget to eat again." They sat on the porch as they had so many mornings, drinking coffee and watching the day arrive. The land around them was changing too. Tom had been detecticide, clearing brush, repairing fences, coaxing the old gardens back to life. It was slow work, but he had time now. More time than he'd ever had before. "Heard from Reyes yesterday," Tom said. 3 more indictments came through. High-level people, the kind who usually skate on technicalities. She says, "My father's ledgers are making cases that would have been impossible otherwise." Elena nodded, satisfied. "Good. About damn time those people faced consequences. Richard Moss took a plea deal. 40 years, no parole. He'll die in prison." "Also, good." Elena studied him. "How do you feel about that?" Tom considered the question. 6 months ago, he would have wanted vengeance, would have taken satisfaction in Moss's suffering. But now, after telling his story, after watching the evidence do its work, all he felt was a quiet sadness for everyone involved. His father, his mother, even Moss himself, trapped by choices made 50 years ago. "I feel like it's finished," Tom said. "Like I can finally let it go." "That's healthy. Your father would approve." Tom smiled. He'd been thinking about his father a lot lately, getting to know him through the letters and journal entries, through the careful handwriting in those ledgers. Miguel Cervantes had been flawed, had made terrible mistakes, but he'd tried to correct them. He'd loved deeply and sacrificed everything for that love. That was worth remembering. The house felt full of his parents now, in ways that comforted rather than haunted. Tom had kept some of the photographs, had hung them on the walls he'd repaired. Rosa as a young woman, Miguel smiling at the camera, the two of them together looking impossibly young and hopeful. Every day, Tom greeted them like old friends. A car appeared on the road, not one Tom recognized. He tensed automatically, old instincts kicking in. But the car was a sedan, non-threatening, and the woman who emerged looked official in a way that suggested government rather than cartel. "Tom Herrera," she called as she approached. "That's me. I'm Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. Patricia Reyes asked me to deliver this to you personally." She held out a manila envelope, official-looking. Tom took it, opened it carefully. Inside was a letter on Department of Justice letterhead, along with a check. He read the letter twice, not quite believing what it said. "They're compensating you," Chen explained, "for your father's cooperation, for the risks you took recovering the evidence, for the ongoing value of that evidence in current prosecutions. It's not a fortune, but it should help." Tom looked at the check. $50,000. More money than he'd had in his entire life. "There's also this," Chen continued, pulling out another document. "Your father was never officially declared dead. No body was recovered. But based on the evidence you provided and additional investigation, He's being posthumously recognized as a law enforcement informant who died in the line of cooperation. His name will be added to the memorial in Washington for agents and informants killed in the line of duty. Tom felt his throat tighten. My father, he'll be remembered. He will. What he did mattered. What you did mattered. Chen offered her hand. Thank you, Mr. Herrera, for your courage. After she left, Tom sat with the letter and the check, overwhelmed. Elena read over his shoulder and whistled softly. Well, looks like you can finish the house properly now. Maybe fix up the barn, get some livestock, make this a working ranch again. Tom nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about his mother, about how she'd scraped by for decades, working 2 jobs, keeping them housed and fed on nothing. This money could have changed her life, could have made everything easier. She would have been proud of you, Elena said, reading his thoughts, not because of the money, because you finished what needed finishing, because you stood up when it mattered. I wish I could tell her, wish she could know that it meant something, all those years of running and hiding. She knows. Wherever she is, she knows. Tom carefully folded the check and put it back in the envelope. He'd cash it tomorrow, use it to make the house what his father had envisioned, a real home, a place of safety and beauty. But for now, he just wanted to sit here with his coffee and his friend and watch the day unfold. The sealed room was empty now, its secrets released into the world where they could do their work. But Tom had started filling it differently. He'd moved a desk in there, had begun writing his own journal. Not criminal records, he had no crimes to document. Just reflections, memories, thoughts about his parents and the life they'd tried to build. Stories for the future, so that someday, if anyone wondered who Tom Herrera had been, they'd have answers. He wrote about Elena and her steady friendship, about Reyes and her determination to make justice mean something, about the house coming back to life, about learning to stay in one place after 40 years of movement, about how strange it felt to finally have roots, to finally belong somewhere. And every entry he started the same way his father had. My name is Tom Herrera, and this is my story. Because everyone's story deserved to be told. Everyone's truth deserved to be known. In the distance, a hawk circled over the scrubland, riding thermals in the warming air. Tom watched it for a long moment, marveling at its grace, its freedom. He'd spent his life trying to be like that hawk, untethered, always moving, never staying. But he understood now that true freedom wasn't about running. It was about choosing where to land. He'd chosen this place. This house his father built. This land that held his family's history. This life that finally felt like it belonged to him. Elena touched his arm. You good? Tom smiled and meant it. Yeah, I'm good. The sun climbed higher. The coffee grew cold. But Tom stayed on that porch a while longer, watching the light change across the land, feeling the weight of his father's legacy settle into something he could carry. Not a burden anymore, a gift. His father had tried to do the right thing. His mother had kept him safe. Elena had stood beside him. Reyes had fought for justice. And Tom, he'd finally stopped running long enough to become the man he was always meant to be. 61 years old, and his life was just beginning. That seemed like a good place to start.